evening. Our top story this week. The Justina Pelletier case prompts a proposal in Congress that would block federal dollars from states with policies that conflict with personal liberties, such as keeping a kid from her parents based on a psychiatrist's disputed opinion. Several Massachusetts legislators are joining together to pass a resolution that would reunite Justina with her parents. And the Massachusetts House budget calls for sweeping changes at the child protective industry, including licensing requirements for all new CPS agents and toughening background checks on foster parents so that criminals don't get the job. In California, the Sacramento County child protective industry is proving to be an utter failure after a case of a kid who died after 10 child abuse reports prompts criticism. 3 California counties did poorly in an audit of their child welfare systems. A new report from the Blue Ribbon Commission on Los Angeles County's child protective industry is highly critical regarding their sluggish approach to reform and claims that the system has fallen into a state of emergency. A new law is being considered that would require California CPS agents to record all interviews with the parents following a child snatching because the parents questioned a second medical opinion. And a California Republican candidate for governor wants to abolish the state's child protective industry and start over. According to a new study, the number of foster kids in the United States who are being treated with antipsychotics for ADHD-like symptoms is on the rise. A Russian expert is blaming the American overuse of psychiatric drugs on kids for all of the school shootings that have taken place over the last few years. In Arizona, the child protective industry has now messed with the victims of all 6,600 previously ignored child abuse reports. And the Arizona legislature approves the funding for Governor Jan Brewer's replacement of the child protective industry. Pope Francis is asking for forgiveness for all of the child sex abuse by clergy over the years. In Canada, an Ontario judge orders a trial for a father who wants custody of his 2 girls who are abandoned by their mother. Canadian foster kids are less likely to graduate from high school and are much more likely to earn $300,000 less in their lifetimes than are non-foster kids. And Ontario's child protective industry is fined $1.4 million for siding with a mother's false allegations against the father. In Australia, the director of a foster care agency is forced to quit over an offensive blog post that they think will offend gays and Muslims. An Australian court rejects a mother's vaccination fears and grants a father's wishes to have their kid vaccinated against disease. There are now calls for the New South Wales child welfare minister to be sacked after a scathing report into the child protective industry. And the Australian child protective industry is now offering a $3,000 cash handout to anybody who's willing to adopt a stolen kid. In England, a judge reunites a family after being separated from their baby for 9 months by overzealous social workers because the kid fell off the bed. And a British judge says that a mother who refuses to allow the fathers to see their kids after divorce should be jailed and have custody taken away from them and given to the dads. In entertainment news this week, actor Jamie Foxx wants to reconcile with his real parents who abandoned him more than 40 years ago. And the California child protective industry gives Brooke Mueller full custody of her and Charlie Sheen's 2 sons. In Nebraska this week, police arrest a National Child Welfare Center associate director for exposing himself after getting drunk and coming out of his motel room yelling at 4 loud teenagers without any pants on. In Bakersfield, California, a 5-year-old boy was sexually assaulted by 2 teenagers at an emergency shelter where he was brought right after being snatched from his home. In Michigan, a driver is charged in a crash that killed a CPS agent. And in New York, a man who was accused of pulling the teeth from an 8-year-old special needs foster kid goes to his pre-trial hearing. In Oregon, a 77-year-old man is under arrest for sexually abusing a foster kid in his care. In Oklahoma, a former adoptive parent of the year who was arrested for child abuse after not seeking immediate medical treatment for the kids who were bitten by her pet monkeys, as it turns out, wasn't even recognized by the state as a foster parent. And an Oklahoma child welfare advocate is accused of revealing private information in abuse cases. In Connecticut, lawyers are fighting against the placement of a transgendered foster kid in an adult male prison. In Indiana, a mother is suing the child protective industry after her CPS agent made false statements about her while conspiring with her ex-husband for custody of their kids. In Michigan, a judge settles a lawsuit brought on by a father who lost his kid because he mistakenly gave the kid a Mike's Hard Lemonade at a Detroit Tigers baseball game without knowing that it was an alcoholic beverage. And in North Carolina, the child protective industry finds a group home after a child who was placed there tries to escape only to get hit by a car. In New York, a judge dismisses roughly 50 cases brought on by the DA claiming that fathers weren't paying their back child support, saying that such cases shouldn't be in criminal court when the family court has plenty of remedies to deal with them, and because most of these fathers were simply too poor to pay up anyway. In Oklahoma, the real mother of baby Veronica, who was stolen from her real father by 2 adopted parents in South Carolina, decides to drop her challenge to the Indian Child Welfare Act. In Texas, a couple is still trying to bring home a kid from the Congo after the country suspended its foreign adoption program this past summer. The Texas family court judge quits, which is leaving a backlog of cases. And finally, tonight in Washington, a girl is suing the child protective industry who didn't do enough to keep herself while being raped in 3 different foster homes. For these stories and all the latest dirt on the child protective industry, visit www.legallykidnapped.com. And until next week, this is Baby LK. Over and out.